Well, it's that time of the week again. It's time for Programming by Stealth, and this is installment 181, recorded June 6, 2025. I'm your host, Alison Sheridan, and of course, I'm joined by your co-host, Bart Bouchotts. Hello, Bart.
Howdy, Alison. Nice to see you on, well, the listeners don't know it's a Friday evening instead of a Saturday, but yeah, whatever.
Well, if they can look at calendars, they might have cracked the code on that, but I'm excited to get back to some more Jekyling.
Yes, indeed, because we are on the precipice of finishing a whole aspect of Jekyll, so this is very much a rounding it out installment. At this stage, we know almost everything we need about how to turn the Markdown into nice HTML. So that lets us take our content and present it, which then prepares us for the next phase, which is, content management system. We can now present our content. How about we manage it? So that's going to be what we pick up after a short hiatus where we, depending on how you listen, we're going to be doing some stuff that's not programming by stealth, but you and I will be talking, but the listeners won't hear us for a wee while. Anyway, I also set you a challenge for the first time, and it literally is the first time in this little series on Jekyll. So how did that go?
Well, I got my calendar mixed up thinking that it was the next time we were going to do Jekyll, and this week we were doing this other thing that we just obliquely talked about. So I did my homework at about 10:30 last night, and it was real interesting because I know now that I could have popped into, I don't know, Claude and said, "Hey, make me a nav bar." And right. do it in Jekyll, and it's going to go into a GitHub page, and I want it to look like this, and it would have done it for me. Obviously didn't want to do that. So I thought, okay, no, I'm just going to go over, and I'm going to do it like kick it old school. I was like, yeah, nav bar. How does Jekyll do nav bars? And I searched I spent a bunch of quality time in the docs, and they don't talk about nav bars at all. I'm like, oh, wait a minute, Bootstrap. That's where I got to go. So I go look up the Bootstrap stuff. So, okay, I got a basic idea what I want to do. This is going to be great. And then before I did that, I spent some time over on Stack Overflow again, just like the old days, and didn't find any answers because Jekyll doesn't do nav bars. But eventually, when I came to my senses and remembered Bootstrap, I was like, okay, I know how to do this. And I looked at the docs. Okay, I start typing in VS Code, and dagnabbit, if VS Code doesn't fill it all in for me, Bart. I type nav. There it is.
Do you have Copilot enabled?
I don't think so. Maybe. It's possible, Copilot, you gotta watch that little
it'll only match the tags. If it starts giving you like real code, you have Copilot enabled.
Yeah, I probably, Copilot's in Excel now, Bart, that thing's infiltrating everything I do. So, yeah, I think so. But so I had to start typing with my eyes closed. Like, I know what I want to say, but I don't want it to put it in there. And then I looked at it, and as it was doing kind of a fancy pants solution to it. And I thought, no, I don't remember how to do the fancy pants, so that's fake. I don't want to take that. So I had to keep hitting delete or, not hitting a tab because it would autocomplete. I was fighting it to get it to stop helping me. I did let it do a little bit, and unfortunately, the piece I let it write was the actual liquid text, so the liquid code. So that was unfortunate, but it worked out. But it started inventing a bunch of stuff that didn't exist, which was fun too. Links that we didn't have, but it could have been helpful. Like, that would have been a good thing to have in our menu bar. But what was funny was when I got done, I was like, okay, now I can go look at Bart's solution. First thing in the morning, I'm gonna start doing the. I did do my review of that piece of the show notes. I did it, and I looked, and you were doing all the fancy pants stuff that VS Code wanted me to do. But I'm still proud of myself for going, no, I'm going to do it with a stone and a chisel. I'm going to do it the real way, so I remember what I'm doing. So anyway, that's my funny little story.
Yeah, I have to say, I just code with Copilot on because you don't have to accept it, right? I've gotten very good at ignoring the suggestions when I don't want them and accepting them when I do. So it doesn't bother me that they're there.
Oh, but Bart, it was like, I would type 3 characters and 15 lines of code would be typed in front of me. And I got to figure out what key do I hit to not accept it. Yeah, but they're just slightly gray versus black of the rest of the thing. I mean, it's like, I don't know. Oh yeah, there's the little Copilot logo. There
Yeah,
she
so you
is.
can turn him off as well, of course, is the other thing you can do. And then they won't do that.
Yeah,
You can
code
turn it off
completion
per
settings,
language.
code completions, all files, code completion, HTML, next edit suggestions. Those are the 3 things that can change.
Yeah, so
Well,
if you turn it off on all files, then he just goes away until you turn them back on. Or you can turn them off on only HTML files, which is because these are .html files we're editing, and then it'll
right.
still offer you help in other files.
Okay. Well, anyway, I thought you'd be proud of me for trying not
Yeah.
to do it the easy way. It's like, I'm never going to learn, I don't want to get
I
out a
wouldn't
calculator
judge
when I'm learning to
people.
subtract.
Yeah, I don't judge people though when they use AI, as long as they understand what the AI is doing and don't just blindly accept it, because that's how bugs go
Right.
into the universe.
But how am I going to understand if I don't do it myself? That's the whole purpose of having the challenge, is for me to do it, to understand which files do I need to change. In fact, because I did it on my own and I didn't do it the easy way, I found a mistake in the show notes where you had something backwards, right?
Yes, my English was wrong. My code was fine. My
Code
English
was
was
fine.
backwards.
Right. But I knew, I was like, no, it was this template came in first and then this template, not in that order. And the only reason I knew that was because I had gone through it with my chisel and stone and done it myself. So I don't see any problem with using it later, but not when I'm trying to learn. That's just, I got to be stronger than that.
Well, with my work hat on, I will often ask Copilot to show me the doc. So Copilot will say, try this function. And I'll go, all right, Copilot, but tell me about that function. What does it actually do? What do the arguments actually mean? And that way I use it.
Yeah, that's a really good piece of advice. I was telling Bart before we started on this that I'm having some interesting things going on with my web server, and I can't have 14 hours straight of Bart's time to talk about it, so I used 14 hours of ChatGPT to talk about it. And there were a lot of times where I would go, do blah, 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 and I'd say, yeah, so what are the possible risks of doing that? Oh, yeah, it could really wreck a lot of stuff. Okay, so can we talk through those things a little bit? And at one point, it did bring down my server, which was cool. But anyway, this is not this week in AI, but it is. I think it's a valid conversation to start having now of where we use it and where we don't, and how to learn.
I think we've just penciled in a chit chat across the pond light for later in the summer when we have a tendency to go on hiatus. Because I honestly do want to talk to you of all people about this, because you have a lot of experience.
That'd be fun. Yeah. All right, penciled in.
Penciled in. Right, okay. So, PBS 180 challenge solution. What was it I said? Oh, yes. So, we had our little demo site, and it had a customized homepage. So, that's where we left things. We learned that you can have different layouts, and they're sort of like Russian nesting dolls. And we did a special fancy pants one for the front page, which did a few extra things, and then had itself wrapped in the default, which is the important part. Because the challenge was to add a navigation bar across all the pages. So the normal pages and the front page, which is now different. Which obviously meant they had to figure out which of our layout files to put the nav bar in. And I think I definitely didn't mention Bootstrap in the challenge description, because I think I called it out as an opportunity to refresh our very rusty Bootstrap memory.
Yeah, you did say to add a Bootstrap 5 nav bar to the top of every page. Actually, I was really proud of myself because it occurred to me to make sure it was at the top of every page, and you never told us to do that. Yeah, you did. Luckily, I did it right. I think I did it right. I sent you a little video that it was technically functional and doing what it was supposed to do. It was not pretty. It was not elegant. It wasn't responsive design, but darn it, there was a nav bar.
But actually, it wasn't ugly. I thought it looked fine.
Yeah, not as cute as
I
yours.
briefly thought it was a screenshot of my one. I was like, I don't remember spacing my buttons out that far. It's like, oh no, that's Alison's
Well, it was
code.
a video.
Okay.
It was a video.
I know it was a video, but
yeah,
that's okay. When I was looking at it and you were jumping around the pages, I was like, but I thought mine were closer together. Why does it look different on Alison's screen? And I was like, oh, it's Alison's code. So,
all right.
Anyway, yeah, you did good. Okay, right. So we need to edit the appropriate template, not template, layout. Just get me words right. Have to get this lingo into my head so that we can all ask ChatGPT for the right answer. So we have our default layout, which is used on all the pages that are not index.md. And index.md says in its front manner that it wants to use this other layout called front_page. So if you open up front_page.html in the layouts folder, you will see that at the top it says, I want to use the default layout as well. So that means you're going to have the Markdown wrapped in the front page layout, wrapped in the default.
Right.
So like you discovered, the correct place to stick our little bar is in the default layout.
Yeah.
And I have the full code of my sample solution in the show notes, and it is quite a lot longer than my code was as we left the things. But a lot of that is comments, because I use this as an opportunity to show you how you can have comments in your Jekyll layouts, which you don't have to share with all of planet Earth. So if you stick an HTML comment in, well, it's in the HTML. So if someone goes view source, it's there. If you were paying for your bandwidth and you had a site that was really popular, that's making every page quite a few kilobytes bigger with hidden content. And it's not a lot for 100 page views, but for 1 million, these things add up, right? So why do you need to have your comments visible to the world? They're your comments. So do them in the liquid. And that way they're not in the final output. And it was an excuse to teach that these exist.
So the comments are in the liquid that when it gets rendered as HTML, they disappear?
Yes.
Okay.
Completely.
Yeah.
So the liquid tag for doing a comment is comment as far as end comment. And the really nice thing about liquid comments is that they completely stop liquid from processing other liquid tags inside it. So if you're debugging some liquid and you want to temporarily hide some liquid without deleting it, just put a liquid comment before and after, and then it temporarily disappears. You see if your bug goes away, and then you take the comments out, like you would in JavaScript or whatever, right?
I was just going to say, when I read that explanation, I was like, wait, you're talking about liquid inside a liquid and the da-da-da-da. And then I went, oh, he just means making just commenting out a line. But in this case, instead of like 2 backslashes, you do the squiggly % comment, end comment.
As far as end comment, yeah.
Yeah.
So you can go over multiple lines. It's all, yeah. So you can do it on one line or whatever. And of course, you can use a little minus symbol to have it extract away the blank spaces. So if you see in my source code, I have a blank line before a lot of my comments to really space out my code. But if you look in the resulting HTML, the whole blank line is gone because that little minus sign says, make all the empty space go away as far as the previous.
Oh, that's a good use for that. I like that. Yeah, we learned about that last time, but I didn't think of that as a use case for it. That's excellent. Cool.
Yes. So that was a little bonus extra thrown in. Now, that explains why my code is a lot longer. The other reason it's longer is because Bootstrap is many things, but it is not concise.
Right.
It likes to have a tag, inside a tag, inside another tag, inside another tag. And so you... And I like to have a new line for every tag or I can't debug it. I've seen people write their Bootstrap all across one line, and I'm like, yeah.
No, really?
You see,
I'd like to be that strong, but
no, that's not strong. That's foolish. So anyway, I went and read the docs because I'd completely forgotten how to do a nav, and so the first thing we definitely want to do is to use the right HTML5 semantic tags on all of our web pages, right? That's not a Bootstrap thing. That's not a Jekyll thing. That's a making screen readers understand your page thing. So my original default layout only used one of these tags, which was main, which is how you tell a screen reader, this is the main content. But now we're adding a nav bar. That's not main content. So that needs to go in a different semantic tag. And the correct one, in my opinion, is header. So I rejiggered my code a bit to make sure I used the header tag so that screen readers would know that this bit here isn't the main content of the page. It's just a header. And then further down is the real stuff. So, being good.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
And I also wanted to sort of space things out nicely. So I blew the dust off my memory of Bootstrap 5's grid layout, the big blow, That a lot of dust came off that. So as you're cleaning your keyboard, that's cute.
I literally did blow on my keyboard because I noticed a weird little hair on it. I got my hair cut, so I got little tiny hairs falling.
Bonus tip, by the way, you taught me about the company OXO, and they do amazing kitchen utensils. They also do computer things. They have a yoke, which has on one side a screen cleaner, and the other side a keyboard brush. And every time you see gunk on your keyboard, you go brush, brush, brush.
Oh, how cute.
And then it all folds away. Oh, it's so cute. I have them everywhere. I bought one. I loved it. I now have one on my home desk, my bedroom desk, my work desk. I have them everywhere now.
Oh,
if I have a keyboard, I have to be able to dust it. It's cool. Anyway,
searching for that while you talk there. Good Grip, sweep and wipe laptop cleaner. Ooh, the Container Store.
Yeah, they're gorgeous. Anyway, so I added a row across the top where I could put the nav bar, and then I made another row which is going to contain the main content. And then I decided, okay, so my main can go into that second row, and my header can go up into the top row, which is where my nav bar is going to go. So all of that already expanded my page, and that was just organizing things, right? I haven't actually done anything yet. So then finally, when I had my grid layout the way I wanted, I started adding my nav bar. And I read the docs and says, okay, so the correct semantic tag is nav. Great, sounds good. Nav class equals nav bar. That will get you a nav bar. But I wanted to have it be responsive because I figured if I in my sample solution didn't make it responsive, Alison would shout at me. So
even though I didn't like mine.
Reading. Yeah, that's fine. You don't have to. I have to do the hard work. You don't have to. So that meant I needed a little bit more work. So I needed a container inside my nav bar to handle the fact that it was going to contain a few pieces, not just the buttons to move around the pages, but a few extra bits and bobs. So my solution has an extra div, yours may not, which is class container fluid, which basically says, I want you, this div, to nicely arrange everything I put inside you. That's what a fluid container does. It just makes it always be properly aligned. As you resize it, it'll always be fine. That's its magic function in life. So now I'm ready to finally start putting pieces into my nav bar. I want a brand because that's a normal way to do a nav bar, right? So the site title is going to go into the brand. So navbar-brand is the class. And I'm going to make it a link to the front page. So that's a 2-for-1. Right? The site is branded and it's a button to the home page. Tick. Right?
Copilot put the brand in and I took it out because I didn't think of it on my own.
No. Well, there's a brand-img as well, which lets you put like a little logo. I didn't do that because then I would have had to do graphics. And I was like, I'm not doing graphics. I hate graphics. Although I could have got AI to do it now that I think about it. Anyway, there we are. So then I was, because I wanted mine to be responsive, I had even more work to do because to make it responsive, you have to have the little hamburger button. But the hamburger button will be magically handled by Bootstrap. So it'll be invisible on wide screens and it'll magically appear when you shrink the screen right in. But it has to be in the code because otherwise it can't magically appear. And the documentation says it must be the second item. Not the first.
Which has to be the second item?
The hamburger button has to be the second item, which is very weird. I hadn't seen that in any of the docs from Bootstrap, but it was very explicit. Second item. Not first or third, second. So, okay, fine. Boop, boop. In it goes. And then finally, I was able to start having my buttons for the pages. But they're what I want to go under the hamburger. So they need another div that says, this is the bit that collapses and expands. So class collapse, navbar-collapse. And to tie it to the button, I have to give it an ID because the button has to say, well, what does this hamburger control? So you'll notice that in the button, it says data-bs for bootstrap-target. And then I give it octosorp or £sign or whatever we're calling it this week, navbar alt markup, and then that is the ID of my collapsible div. So that's how it knows that this hamburger button is going to make this div go up and down. And then I was finally ready to put my buttons in.
You were just having fun, weren't you, Bart? Admit it.
Yeah, mildly. Yeah. I was like, well, if I'm going to blow the dust off this Bootstrap stuff, let's just do it. And then finally, I was able to write my little liquid for loop to loop over my pages and stick in my links. And then I had a nav bar and it was working pretty well. Then I got fancy and I went right back up to the top and I added in BG-light to give it a light background. I gave it the class navbar-light to sort of tone down the black a little bit in the text and stuff. Then I said navbar expand SM, which says if the screen is phone sized, hamburger button. All other sizes just show the menu, no hamburger. So if I'd said expand-MD, it would have been the hamburger for 2 sizes or LG for 3 sizes, etc. And I got really fancy and I said rounded-pill to make it into a little very, very round pill shape. Border-1 to give it a 1 pixel border. And then I was done being fancy. It's like, oh, I've blown enough dust off this now. So actually, the Jekyll code, or the liquid/Jekyll code, really is just the assign tag to go and fetch all the pages. I filtered out my homepage because I have that as the brand. If I hadn't done the brand, I wouldn't have had to filter it. I would have had an easier time, but I did my brand. So I had to filter it out. And then I have my liquid for loop to actually put in my links. And then I got really fancy. And I added in an if statement so that the current page would be a different style to the other pages.
Oh, I didn't notice
which
that.
the Bootstrap documentation says you give it the class active if it's the current page, and then it'll be dimmed because it's the active button.
Oh, I see what you're saying. That's
And then because you make me think about accessibility, which is great. Thank you. So I also added aria-current equals page, again inside the if statement, because that's how you tell a screen reader that this is a nav bar and this button here is the one representing the current page. So the screen reader is fully aware.
So is that only necessary if you do the class dash active?
Well, they're complementary. So the class active makes it visually show you.
Right.
And the aria current tells the screen reader the same information.
Right. So I'm saying if you didn't make it active, if you didn't have that active function, there'd be no reason to tell the screen reader that because the sighted people don't get to know. So those people don't get to know either.
Yeah, exactly. It'd be weird to send a mixed message, right? If you're partially sighted, you don't know what's going on because your screen reader is telling you one thing and your eyes are telling you another. So yeah, you would do them as a pair. Okay, so that's my very over-engineered solution, but I thought it was a good opportunity.
Yeah, I think so.
Right. I've said everything. My show notes take a lot longer to say, so I'm going to scroll right by and get us to today's topic. Because today's topic is reusable snippets within Jekyll. And Jekyll uses a feature called includes, which I think is actually a sensible name for a thing that's reusable, right? You can include it here and include it there. So they're called includes. But I'm going to use the colloquial term snippets because you and I spend so much of our life in Text Expander. That's just how my brain thinks about little things I can put places, right? They're snippets.
Yeah. So there is no official name for that?
Includes. They are Jekyll includes. And if you go to the Jekyll docs, they're in the sidebar as includes.
Okay.
So that's the real
but
jargon.
That's a good title. Reusable snippets with Jekyll includes.
I was pleased with myself. So in the previous installment, we looked at how we can do our HTMLification, for want of a better term, right? With these nesting dolls as our way of wrapping our HTML. So the Markdown gets converted to HTML and that bare HTML gets wrapped in our layouts to make a nice web page. And that gets you an awful lot of the way. That gets you the vast majority of what you need to have a nice web page. But there are little edge cases where you need something a little bit more powerful than just nesting, because that's very rigid. And there's 2 very obvious use cases, and rather than trying to explain them to you in the abstract, I'm going to show, not tell. So
good.
I'm going to tell you how they work, and then I'm going to show you why you care.
Perfect.
I was listening to a podcast on writing a good book, so I have show, not tell in my head. But anyway.
I like it. So yeah, I get tangled when we stay abstract too long. When you give a worked example, it works a lot better for me.
Yeah. So the good news is the syntax is surprisingly simplistic, but powerful. So your little snippets, or includes, to give them their formal title, go in a folder called _includes. So next to your underscore layouts, you're going to have a new folder called _includes where your snippets live. The Jekyll tag, the liquid tag for pulling a snippet in is include. So you include your includes. So far, so good.
Okay.
It is that thing that you don't like where it's the same word in two contexts, which I think Jekyll see as a feature, but I think you see as a bug, where they use the same name for two things.
This one might not be terrible. I think we'll allow it.
Okay, we'll reserve judgment. I reserve the right for you to disagree later, but it won't help.
This is how you can tell when people have been podcasting together for more than 15 years, right?
20 years or whatever, yeah.
That's so funny.
So as well as just, okay, so the very, very simple syntax is open curly %, include, space, a file name, close your %curly, and that's it. And that will go and fetch the snippet, and it will basically splat it right there in the code. So it's as if you copied and pasted it in. That's how you should mentally think about it. And whatever would be valid in the layout, you can have in the snippet, because it is literally as if you wrote it there. It's just a shortcut for that text. So if you have a whole bunch of liquid syntax sitting in your snippet, not a problem. It'll work just fine. You're just slapping it in.
Okay.
The file name you give it is relative to the includes folder.
Oh, because you're already saying include. You don't need to say _include/.
Right, but it's also a security feature because you can't use an includes tag to pull in a random file from the file system, like say /etc/passwd, right? So that's why it's done that way. The include tag, its blast radius is limited to that folder. So you can't use it to pull random stuff into the website.
Somebody would have to inject something into includes for it to do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and then you have way bigger problems.
Right.
So we got very wrong. And then the last cool feature is that just like when you're using Text Expander, with Text Expander, it will let you do real variables like today's date, which is an example of a real variable, but it will also let you ask for information. So there needs to be the concept of pulling some information into your snippet, right? If you're writing a generic snippet that handles, say, the name of a file with Text Expander, you're going to make it use today's day-month-year. No, year-month-day, whatever. Right. So you have the same concept of being able to pull stuff into your snippet, and you do that with arguments, and they're just key equals value. So name of argument equals value of argument, and they're just put after the file name, just file name space something equals something space something equals something space something equals something, as far as you like.
Okay. The snippet that you're putting in there has to be requiring those key value pairs.
It doesn't have to be, but otherwise it's a bit wasteful, right? If you don't use them inside the snippet, if you don't use them, they don't cause an error.
The purpose of it, though.
Yeah, precisely. The purpose of it is to use it. Precisely. Which leads to the obvious question, okay, great, so how do I use them inside my snippet? So this is how I give them to the snippet. So inside the snippet, where do they go? The answer is they go into a liquid variable named include. So include dot whatever name you gave it. So now we have include doing three things. So
yeah,
maybe
no.
Much.
I was with you on the first two. Okay, I couldn't repeat that if you held a gun to my head.
Well, that's why the demo will actually make it, the worked examples will pull it together because it sounds weird in the abstract.
Okay.
But I promise you the examples your brain will go, oh, okay. You may not like it, but you won't hate it. Well, you might. But
I won't completely deny it. Okay.
Yes. Okay. So our first worked example represents a whole class of problem. So we have these nested dolls, which are very powerful. But a lot of really big websites in particular like to have certain templates for pages that are completely different. They're nothing like the other pages. The obvious one is the landing page. Like if you think of your default theme for Podfeet, your landing page is completely different to every other page on your website, right? The theme provides you a very special experience on that page. And if you go to the home page of Ars Technica, it looks completely different to the thousands of other pages on Ars Technica. Another example might be a photo gallery. If you have a website for a photographer, they may use a completely different, maybe a black theme of some sort for their photo pages, while the rest of their site could be bright pink. I don't know, right? Whatever fits their brand. But when they're showing off their photographs, you might want to intentionally completely change things. So while nesting is very powerful, there are times when you want to break out of the nest, where you want to have multiple different top-level layouts. So you'll have default, and then you might have a whole other one that starts with the tag doc type, HTML, head, body, right? You might have a completely different layout.
Sure, that makes sense.
So that is understandable. Simultaneously, your website probably uses some sort of a library like, say, Bootstrap or your corporate style sheet, because your site still has a unified look, so it has some sort of an identity. You may be using jQuery or something, in which case you're going to have the jQuery JavaScript on every layout. But if you completely separate them, you now have the bad choice to copy and paste the jQuery code into 2 places, and then you make your site a bit bigger and you copy and paste it into 3 places, and then you do the same for the Bootstrap CSS, and then you do the same for your corporate branding.
Completely defeating the purpose of all of this.
And leaving your site spectacularly brittle when you decide to, I'll upgrade my jQuery, and you do it in 2 out of the 3. Which means that on 1/3 of your website, you're running a different version of jQuery. Just imagine the chaos that could cause, or the really subtle bugs. It's like, this works, but then it doesn't, but then it does. Why? I mean, it would drive you nuts. So there has to be a better way of doing this. And you obviously know where we're going here, right? The whole episode is about reusable snippets. So you take those pieces that you want to have in all of your top-level layouts, and you put them in snippets. And then you have one place to edit it, which is inside the snippet, and then you can just use that snippet all over the place.
Exactly like Text Expander. I have referral links, for example, that get called by a bunch of different things that I do. My Text Expander snippets go in there, and when I say, oh, hey, wow, now I've got 20th anniversary shirts, I have that, I go in and I put it in one place, and every time I say, okay, here's all the referral stuff, or ways to support the show, it'll splat right in there, and I don't have to remember, I got to put it in my WordPress, and I got to go put it in the feed, and I got to go put it in the social media. It doesn't have to.
That's brilliant. And that doesn't surprise me at all, because you're very good at this whole branding thing and being on message. I got to learn from you on that one.
I try. If I just picked a good brand, that would have been good. That's another story.
Oh, that's a bit where I'm completely gone. I paid someone quite a lot of money to do my branding. I like it, but it cost me a lot.
Oh, I mean, I just mean Podfeet. It's like, jeez.
I'm stuck with Bartificer, and I kind of like it in hindsight, and there's a story to it, and it reminds me of my teenage years, so I'm going to stick with that one. But in terms of the visual and the audio, I spent a lot of money. But
you had fun, though.
I did, yes. Okay. So the answer is, of course, snippets. So to illustrate how this works, we are going to first make our existing default layout use snippets. And then we have the freedom to make a completely separate layout, which will also use those same snippets. And that will demonstrate the whole process. So we're going to actually completely redo the front page layout so that it's utterly different to the default layout and isn't nested anymore. So to use our snippets, we need to create our snippets first. And the two pieces we need to snippetify, I've made that word up, but I
I
like it,
like it.
is inside the HTML head tag, there is some CSS and some other code for Bootstrap. There's the viewport. I always want my site to be in UTF-8 or silly things happen. So that's 2 tags. And then there's the link rel equals tag to pull in the Bootstrap CSS. So those 3 things need to come out. And at the very, very, very bottom of the body, there is the script tag to pull in Bootstrap's JavaScript. So
Hang
that
on.
also has to come out.
These are coming out of which page?
At the moment, they're in default.html in our layouts.
Okay. So,
And at the moment, they're working fine because our front page is wrapped in default.
yeah, so I followed what you did in the show notes at this point, but I didn't understand, and I understand the problem to be solved is the whole do it in a text expander snippet so that you only change it once. But I don't see how this is ever doing it more than once the way it is right now. It's already in our default layout. We call our default layout, and then we call we wrap it again in the front page layout. All the pages get that default layout. What's the problem?
There isn't one yet. This is why I'm saying the first step is to genericize the default. The second step is to break that assumption you've just made. So right now, the home page wraps itself in the default.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm saying we want the home page to be completely different, totally unique. So it's not going to be wrapped in default.
Oh, so the problem is it's not a problem that these things are in default. The problem is there's other stuff in default. But if you make these be snippets, if you make these be includes, then you can apply them without pulling everything else that's in there. Now I got it.
Yes.
Because I kept looking at these things going, you're going to want these on every page. You want a UTF-8, you want the Bootstrap stuff, and you want the CSS. Why would you take it out? But that exactly backwards. Good. I'm glad I asked.
Brilliant. And thank you, because if you're thinking it, there are listeners thinking it too.
At least one.
Yeah, you. So I named my files html_head_common.html, which is the common material from the HTML head tag, and html_body_end.html, because it's the stuff that needs to go at the very end of the body tag. That's just how my brain made it not seem confusing.
Okay. Yeah, no, it works.
Waffles.
Good to know.
So I literally copied the stuff out of the default.html, and then I did also add some comments while I was at it, because it was like, well, if I'm going to genericize these, I should probably say what they do. So that when I look back at it, it makes sense. So that's all I did. I just took them, copied them, added some comments. And then I went back to my default.html and deleted them. And then I put in include html_head.common.html and include html_body_end.html. And that actually pulls them in. And like you say, the end result is nothing changes.
Right.
For now.
Right.
So now that we have this foundation laid, we are now free to make our front page layout not inherit from default. We're now liberated from the need to inherit from default. So I'm going to take my front page layout, so which is sitting in _layouts/front_page.html. Going to throw it all in the bin, and I'm going to build a completely fresh layout because I'm going to make the front page totally different. So now we can start with a nice blank HTML head, and we just include our same snippets. And then we end the body, and we include our same snippets. And so now we have all the standard stuff, and we're completely free to do a completely custom front page. And the first thing I did was I made a different title. So in the default theme, the title is the page's title, vertical pipe, the site title, which when you're on the About page makes sense, right? About, and I'm inside this website. If you go to Ars Technica, you'll see headline of story, vertical line, Ars Technica.
Mhm.
But on the home page, you're actually branding just the site. Having it say home, pipe, Ars Technica doesn't add any value. It just adds clutter. The bit you really want is your brand, and you want it at the front of the tab because everyone has 500,000 tabs, so there's like 2 characters. So only show the site title, which I can now do because this doesn't affect any page on my entire website anymore other than the front page. So I just
see what
changed
you're
my
saying.
title.
Okay. I'm
No,
a
it
little
was
distracted because I'm trying to think,
Sorry.
why didn't you make the HTML at the top and the bottom and head? Why didn't you make all that part of a snippet too?
Well, because
Or
then I'm not
includes?
free to add in, say, some extra CSS for only this page, because I need that to go in the head. Or some extra JavaScript. Maybe if I'm using a gallery page, I want some JavaScript to do the gallery animation. So I might want to add some extra stuff at the bottom of
But
the body as well.
no, I get that, but so you can't have includes that just does the head/head.
I could write one include to start the head and a whole separate include to end the head and then different includes in the middle. But
That's just
there's a
getting
point where
clumsy.
you have too many snippets. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, look,
Yeah,
there's
okay.
no right answer.
Okay, it's
just
not impossible to do what I said. It's just clumsy. Got it. And you're used to seeing here's the head, here's the body.
I kind of am. Yeah, I think it would
Yeah.
break my head if that was gone. I don't think I'd understand my own code.
All puns included. Okay.
Oh, actually, sorry, I just saw that. Thank you.
Okay, so that's how we modified the title for the primary page.
Yeah. And then I went with a completely different main page. So I gave the entire page BG Light, so the entire page now has a grey background. And then I made use of Bootstrap's card, so the entire page is now one of those brochure-style pages where it's just one giant big jumbotron. So the whole thing's
Oh,
just a big card.
we haven't played with those since I think it was the currency converter when we learned how to do
Right.
that. Wow,
Yeah, and that was
that's the
Bootstrap
Wayback
4.
Machine.
Yeah. Because Bootstrap 4 had a separate thing called Jumbotron. Bootstrap 5 just says, a Jumbotron's a card. I'm not doing this twice. So in Bootstrap 5, you don't make a Jumbotron with a Jumbotron, you just make it with a card. So
Okay.
that's why it says class equals card.
Okay.
But
yeah,
it's
I
the
wasn't
same
talking about
effect.
the jumbotron stuff. It was the card part that I remember doing when we did the currency converter. I had each one that it would build. It would be a separate card. That's way back.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Like I
had
say, I was blowing the dust off
fewer
my
wrinkles.
Bootstrap. So I made it a card and I put the image into the card and then I made the title really big and I basically made it into a card. And instead of having a bulleted list of pages, I made it a nice little row of buttons at the bottom of the Jumbotron. And it just looks, the main point is it's 100% different.
Right.
That's the point. I could have made it bright pink to hammer the point home, but then I thought better and just went, no, let's make it at least not obnoxious, but clearly different. And that really is the point of snippets, is that I can do this. And if you want to read more about the Bootstrap, I made use of the call and all that kind of stuff again. So we kind of talked about this in the sample solution. So we probably don't want to dive too deep into it here now. And while where going is good, let's look at the second worked example, which covers the entire. Okay, hang on one sec.
I have my hand up. He could see it. You didn't do the includes thing in this one, right? I didn't miss it.
Correct. So the first thing I did was at the top, there is no front matter. There is no more, please wrap me in default. Right? Gone.
But the includes, the third time you use includes with a third definition, I haven't learned it yet. It's in the next example?
Yes.
Okay.
So that covers how to use includes inside our layouts. And that gives us a lot of power for the structure of our site. The second use of includes is to give the actual content some superpowers. So Markdown is amazing as a writing tool because it's so simple. It gets out of your way and you're free to write. And most of the time, that's a feature, not a bug. But every now and then you bump into a little limitation that John Gruber didn't think about the universe the way you do, and the syntax doesn't quite match what you'd like. And the
Or
one that I
a feature
know
doesn't
hits you,
exist.
or doesn't exist, yeah. So I know one of the things that makes you cranky about Markdown is that you have the concept of an image, but it is the HTML IMG tag, right? You can say, where's the URL? What's the alt text, the alternative text for screen readers? And you can also add a title, which is what happens when you hover the mouse over it. So that's what makes XKCD so much fun. It's the title, which is all you can do. And if you read the HTML5 spec, there's a whole other tag called figure into which you put the IMG, followed by the whole other tag fig caption. And that is designed to make one piece that is the image with a caption. None of that in Markdown. So
Right,
how do we add that into our website?
So on podfeet.com, every image you see for the last, I don't know, at least 5 years or so has been a figure. So it shows the image, and it's wrapped in a little tiny thin line, and then it has the caption, and the caption is italicized. It's a little bit smaller text, and it tells you what's in the image. Or sometimes just says something silly.
Oh, whatever's appropriate. Yeah. But the point is, Markdown doesn't have that. So we need to make, effectively, a reusable snippet to build the HTML for that, because Markdown can include HTML syntax and it will work just fine. So our little reusable snippet is going to get pulled into an MD file this time instead of into an HTML file, because it's now coming into our content, but it doesn't matter because you can have HTML in your Markdown and everything will work just fine. So we get to write some HTML and it'll be grand. But we do need arguments, which we didn't need in our first example. Because we need to be able to, there's no point in me writing the HTML for one specific image with one exact caption and having you stamp that 500 times across your website. You need to be able to have a different image with a different caption and different alternative text every time, which tells you we need 3 arguments. One of them I'm going to call src because that's how the HTML works, and that way my brain won't forget it, which is going to be the path to the image. The other one I'm going to call alt, because that's the HTML attribute for alternative text. And the last one I'm going to call caption, because it is going to be the caption to stick under the image.
Okay.
I'm going to name my snippet figure.html, which again I think is a nice, sensible name. So the first thing I'm going to do is write the code for my figure, and then I'm going to show you how to use it. So this is the code for the snippet. And so the snippet contains the HTML tag figure and some Bootstrap we'll talk about later to make it look pretty. That's not part of its functionality. It contains the HTML IMG tag, and then we're going to come back to the detail in a moment. Then it contains the fig caption tag, and then it ends the figure tag. So we need to include our arguments, and we named them src, alt, and caption. So I told you they are presented to the snippet inside a dictionary named include. So src becomes include.src. Alt becomes include.alt. Caption becomes include.caption. And so we use liquids. The word liquid uses is object. The word I keep saying to you is placeholder. So we use a liquid placeholder, which is officially a liquid object, to add our source. So we say curly curly include.src. We pipe it to the relative URL filter so it actually works. And then we close our curlies. Then we say the alt is going to be open our curlies, include.alt, close our curlies. Not all that exciting. And then we say inside the fig caption, curly curly, include.caption, pipe, markdownify. So remember last time we quibbled that the name of the markdownify filter was backwards because it turns markdown into HTML. And you were like, well, why would we need that? And I said, yeah, put a pin in that for about a week.
Yeah.
Here it is. Because this way our caption can have markup, so we can have italic-y bits or bold bits or a link. A link in a caption, that's pretty useful, right? So
Right.
this way we can write full Markdown in our captions.
I've been known
And
to
this is
put
generic.
a /br in a caption if I need to, like, I often say click to embiggen if I have a really complicated graph, and I'll put that as a, as a link to the, or
Right.
actually the whole thing will be a link, but they don't know to click it unless I tell them to click to embiggen, but I always put that on a separate line.
Makes
There's a
sense.
piece of this that I tried to do and didn't work. And that
Okay.
was being able to define the width of the, graphic that was going in there. It just should be width equals, quote, 150.
That really, okay, so you're writing HTML, so whatever you have that will work with HTML will work. But if you copied my code, you also stole a bunch of Bootstrap from me, and the Bootstrap you stole from me might be fighting with the CSS you added yourself with the width.
Actually, I've
So
just had a thought. I wonder if it's supposed to have PX in it.
that will make it behave differently.
Yeah, I think it might be now that I didn't think of it, this morning when I was racing to get ready, but, that might be it.
The other subtlety to consider is that the old with equals is the HTML4 thing. If you're doing HTML5, it should really be style equals with colon whatever PX.
Actually, no, it should just be width equals, quote,
No,
and the
no,
number.
that's the old HTML. That's what I'm saying. That's the old HTML4. The more modern way is to use the style attribute and use actual CSS code. And that way you can do percentages and other cool stuff. And that will not fight with Bootstrap to the same way because you're doing it as CSS. So I would say don't say with
I know
equals, say
nothing
style
about
equals.
this. I know nothing about this, Bart. This is 100% news to me. I've been writing it this way for 20 years. It's good enough for me, Bart.
Right, you wrote it for 20 years because until CSS came along, what you were doing was the right way to do it.
Well, CSS existed, but so I don't understand how Bootstrap could override a specified width in
Okay,
numbers.
so it's all up to the browser. So Bootstrap uses CSS. So the browser is getting mixed signals. It is being told one thing through CSS and a different conflicting thing through the legacy width attribute.
I've never seen CSS say how big my images are.
Width. We definitely covered this
But you didn't.
5 years ago.
You
No,
didn't
5
in here.
years ago.
But you
No,
didn't
right.
in here. So why would it not
Right,
be
because, okay.
Why can't I override it if it's not being done by the CSS?
But what I'm saying is the browser is being told by the legacy width attribute it should be 500 wide. And it is simultaneously being told by class equals img-fluids to do something else. I am saying that if the browser's brain resolves this conflict in favor of the newer CSS and not the older HTML4 tag, then you would lose. I don't know under the hood what the browser does with a mixed signal, but I do know
image-fluid means change the physical size of it.
Yes, that is the Bootstrap utility class to make the image shrink and grow as you resize the window. And I wanted it to shrink so that you never have a scroll bar appear. So this is what I chose to do. It's not a feature of Jekyll. It's not a feature of include.
Well, I thought I was just typing HTML in there and it didn't have any effect. Okay, so it probably is the image-fluid. I don't want to do percentages. I want to give it a size.
Well, take the image-fluid out and start from first principles and style the image the way you want.
Yeah, okay. But it does explain, I wasn't necessarily misunderstanding any of the includes or the Jekyll stuff. It was me being stuck in the past in my HTML. Okay.
Yeah, but there's a lot of options, and I think my image-fluid was fighting with you because that's doing modern Bootstrap stuff. So I think that won. Mentioning the modern Bootstrap stuff, what I chose to do, which is purely arbitrary, is to make my figure have a really wide margin left and right, so mx-5, give it a 1 pixel rounded border, which is why it says border-1 rounded, and center my text, so text-center. And actually, very much in keeping with your approach on Podfeed, I also said text-muted on the Fig caption to make it be a darker shade instead of the full-on black. So again, that works nicely. So that is how we define our snippet. So the last piece of the puzzle is, how do we include our snippet? Well, the answer is we use our include tag. So we say open curly %, include space, figure.html space, src equals the name of the logo, which the show notes told you to copy into the folder illustrations, which is purely arbitrary, and we could have called waffles, but I called it illustrations. And then alt equals our alt text, the silhouette of a ninja head wrapped with curly braces, and the caption, which contains the Markdown syntax to italicize Programming by Stealth, and the caption is the Programming by Stealth logo. And that is it. So I can put that in any Markdown file, and I now have a figure. And I can do that 100 times, 1,000 times. Away it goes.
That's cool.
So one last little bonus here. If you are writing very short alt tags and very short captions, this works. But if you're going to get a wee bit verbose, this will be one line of doom. Right? Especially you want some new line characters and stuff, that would not work. So there's an amazing liquid tag called capture. And you wrap it around any piece of content, and it takes all the content and shoves it into a variable. And you can have any valid liquid syntax between capture and end capture, and it will shove the result of doing the for loop or whatever into the variable. So the structure for doing big captions and big alt text is just capture. So in our example code, I'm going to add the Bartificer logo with a really detailed alt tag and a really long caption with a link. And so the first thing I do is I capture the alt text and I say capture, and the variable name I chose is Bartificer _logo_alt. A little bit verbose, but I thought it'd be explicit. And then I can write as much as I want. So A green lowercase letter B wrapped in orange chevrons over the word Bartificer, mostly in green, except for the letters A or T, which are in orange to match the chevrons, yada, yada, yada. End capture. And so all that text is now sitting in a variable named Bartificer _logo_alt. Then I start a new capture, and I say I want to capture a new variable called Bartificer _logo_caption. And I write a whole bunch more Markdown, and it says the Bartificer Creations logo. The name Bartificer is a portmanteau of Bart and Artificer, and I link to the definition of portmanteau. Right? And then I end my capture.
Okay.
So now when I go to use my include, the only difference is instead of having a string for the alt text and the caption, I give the name of the variable. So there are no quotation marks, which tells Liquid, this is not the string Bartificer _logo_alt. It is the variable Bartificer _logo_alt. And then all that text gets put into the right part of my figure. And I can write freely, and I can even put new line characters in there, and they'll work just fine, right? Because this is all going through Markdownify. So if you don't even need to use BRs, you can just put empty lines inside that capture, and it'll work fine.
That's cool. So it's basically to make things more readable. This is its main function, right?
The capture is to make it more readable, but also you could put any liquid syntax you wanted in there. So you could have a for loop to loop over every page on your website. If for some reason you wanted a snippet that listed all of the pages in your website. Actually, let's say you wanted to make a snippet for a little card that'll float on the right, and it could randomly pick 5 blog posts. You could write the Jekyll to randomly pick the Liquid to randomly pick 5 blog posts and put it inside the snippet. And then you could put that snippet anywhere you wanted on your site. You just have 5 random links.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
So you get very creative.
Yeah.
It's a very powerful tag. Right, well, that brings us to the end of how we turn Markdown into a fancy HTML web page. The hard part is the creativity. These are the Lego blocks you can build with, and they are enough to do pretty much anything. The problem now is that I'm not very creative, so I can't really show you how to make it blingy and shiny, but the mechanics, we've covered them all. This is the how, and the creativity is now over to you. So to cement in this last piece, one last challenge. Let's make a snippet. So one of the things I'm very fond of on the PBS site is the ability to have my little side thoughts be obviously different from the main flow of a document. And so you'll see that I did that using some fancy stuff in our theme to make little asides, which I render as a little Bootstrap card. So let's repeat that, but let's do it using an include. And so the challenge is to make a new snippet which will use Bootstrap's card syntax to make a little note, and that note should receive an argument named content, and it should basically present that argument as a little note and style it however you think makes sense, whether you want it to float right or whether you want it to be in bright yellow. I don't care, right? Use a Bootstrap card and have fun. Right? Use it as an opportunity to play.
By the way, there's an HTML name for this that's called an aside.
Ah, okay. Well, you can do that. Yeah. So you'd use that tag and then style it class equals card and take it from there. And if you'd like a little bonus credit, then why not add another argument called title, which, if it's present, would use Bootstrap's card has a feature for having a little title across the top of a card. So you could have a Jekyll if state or a liquid if statement to only put a title in if there is a title, and then show your title. And then for bonus credit, a little footer optionally to a read more link.
Oh, look at you.
So you pass it a URL and then make a button.
Now, have you tested this one to see how hard it is?
No, not yet, but I know how it works.
It sounds doable.
Yeah. It's the same atoms as our figure example, but putting them together to achieve a different end.
Right, right.
And that wraps up quite a lot of content, really. So we've learned the basics of how Jekyll takes Markdown and turns it to HTML, and understanding how it does that allows us to then assert control using the Liquid templating engine to create our layouts. Our layouts we now know can make use of includes. We've learned that Liquid uses the terribly named tags as placeholders. Liquid has tags for doing programmy stuff like if statements and for loops. And Liquid has filters for manipulating a piece of information, like taking some Markdown and turning it to HTML with the Markdownify filter. So we've met, the relative URL filter for making sure URLs work, whether you go to GitHub or to local and so forth. So these are the pieces of every Jekyll website. So now we're going to take a short break, and then we're going to learn how to structure not the presentation of our content, but the organization of the content. Because like with WordPress, you have taxonomies like tags and categories. There are 2 taxonomies. You have different types of content. You have pages in WordPress and you have blog posts. Jekyll has all of these same types of features. We haven't learned anything about them yet. So that's next.
Well, that sounds fun. So if people do want to keep track of what Bart and I are doing when we're not talking programming by stealth, you can listen to the NosillaCast every other week when Bart talks security bits, of course. And we think we might be doing a Chit Chat Across the Pond episode, which is another podcast that's embedded in NosillaCast, but it's also standalone if you just want to go hear Bart. So keep your eye out on that feed, and you should find out where we are.
One of those little ironies of the universe is that the Chit Chat Across the Pond name was invented by me as an excuse to talk to Alison every week, and now I'm almost never on it anymore.
The name just wanders around and it collects people and has fun, Adam Angst has it now, so.
Yeah. I'm really enjoying it, by the way. You and Adam have great conversations. And now that Adam has really good mic and stuff, it's so nice when you guys chat.
Oh, good. Yeah, we have a good time. So since this is evergreen, this may make no sense to you if you're listening to this 2 years from now. Who is it? Is it Graham Smale, who's working his way through? He's starting at episode 1 right now, I think it is. So in like 4 years when he gets here, hopefully you'll hear his name.
Oh, that'd be fun. Hi, Graham. Greetings from 2025.
All right, Bart. Well, we will see you when we come back.
Indeed we shall. And until then, folks, you know what to do. Lots and lots of happy computing.
If you learn as much from Bart each week as I do, I'd like you to go over to lets-talk.ie and press one of the buttons over there to help support him. He does 98% of the work here. I'm just the stooge that listens to him and asks the dumb questions. If you go over to lets-talk.ie, you can support him on Patreon, you can donate via PayPal, or you can use one of his referral links. I really hope you'll go over and help him out. In the meantime, you can contact me at Podfeet or check out all of the shows we do over there over at podfeet.com. Thanks for listening and stay subscribed.